I'm Jim Beecham. I've had the privilege of being president over the last year of COTI. Thank you so much for being here. And of course, you're all distinguished visitors. Today, I want to share my observations about several things. But before I get into that, I just wanted to give you a little snapshot of how I've gotten here. Because that history I found in walking around the island is always interesting. I'm not going to go into all the details, but in 1975, I literally tripped across Sanibel like so many visitors do. In talking to Kevin before the meeting, he talked about statistics that, what was it, one out of nine visitors come to live here within 15 years of their first visit. Well, it took me a little longer. I came in 1975. I stayed here kind of as a vacationer. And then finally in 1998, I bought a house, and I did look at that as an investment property at first, rented it for, I guess, 8 years. And then in 2007, after selling a business, I decided to become a resident, and Terry, my wife, and I came down here and have been living here, not totally full-time yet, but enough to justify residency for sure. And along the way, I certainly got involved with different organizations, but most importantly, COTI. First got involved back in 2000. I think the real big thing was the discussions and some would say battles over building a high-speed bridge. Some people said that it was going to be a 4-lane, 55-mile-an-hour highway. That obviously didn't happen, and it was a lot of the work of people on council at the time and just citizens like yourself that prevented that from happening. And it's kind of would be the bridge to nowhere that we heard about up in Alaska. So let me just go over. I'm talking to the choir, I know, but let me first just go over the kind of what I've observed to be the value of COTI. The community and city of Sanibel, in my opinion, is a true democracy in which our voices have impact on important decisions and produce tangible results. Through cooperative action, your voice is heard and acted on to help ensure your quality of life. COTI really represents the interests of residents, snowbirds, repeat visitors, and property owners, while seeking to ensure economic viability of the island. COTI is truly a volunteer organization. We don't have any full-time staff. If you look at all the other organizations on the island that are not-for-profits, they all have these staffs, they have offices, and not all of them, many of them do. We don't have that, but we're somehow, with a core group of people and the support of all you and many others that aren't here today, somehow we are able to serve as a civic advocate to ensure effective government, help conserve Sanibel's natural ecosystem, maintain a friendly, small-town community, and protect home values. We have all worked hard to ensure the next 40 years is as special as the last 40 years, and that we pass this gift on to future generations. COTI's unique role on Sanibel as a group of citizens is to remain vigilant to encourage adherence to the Sanibel vision, the Sanibel plan, and the Land Development Code. One or more of our COTI board members attends every city council meeting, every planning commission meeting, and in fact, one of our members has been accused of being the 8th member of the planning commission without being on it. Who is that? Larry Shop, okay? And that was by one of the key commissioners. Huh?
It was by Doug Converse.
Oh, it was by Doug. Yeah. Oh, there you go. Thank you for reminding me that. COTI and Sanibel's success is a result of the talents, work, and dedication of many volunteers, but especially those on the COTI board, on the city council. The city council is really important to us. They make the real decisions, and on many of the city commissions. The magic of Sanibel is that our city government, COTI, and other Sanibel organizations work together to make effective decisions that produce positive results. As we increase the size of our COTI community, we increase our collective capability to have influence on decisions and actions made by Sanibel leaders. And you all can help us increase our size. There are actually multiple ways you can help us, but probably the most important way you can help us is by reaching out to your neighbors and friends, to talking with people and organizations you belong to, and having them be a part of our organization. There's two ways they can do that. Obviously, they can join and make contributions through their dues, and our dues are tiny. Okay, we don't do a big gala. We don't do fundraising like the 63 other organizations on the island. We do it through our dues. So those dues are important to us. So if you haven't already joined, and I'm sure many of you have joined or renewed, please do that. But secondly, talk to your neighbors and friends. Tell them to register for our e-news. Ask them if they would join COTI and be a part of our effort to keep Sanibel special. And lastly, and certainly importantly, once you receive our e-messages, and I assume, how many people receive our e-messages and read them, right? Okay, everybody, right? I hope they're helpful. It's been a program that's been building over the last 4 years, 5 years, and it's an important way for us to inform you and get you involved, and also inspire you to action. So when we send those out, please certainly read them, but equally important, when you feel it's important, certainly send an email off to the City Council, to the county commissioners or other state leaders, because I can assure you that political leaders react to that. I think we had Ralph Brooks talk to us 2 years ago, and Ralph made a big point. He works with communities all across the country on basically civic action issues, and he made a big point of that involvement. So all these personal actions will strengthen our efforts to keep Sanibel special. Let me now review some of Sanibel and COTI's accomplishments. And I want to emphasize this is a group thing. COTI has influence, but it really is the City Council, the other organizations on the island that collectively make things happen. Working effectively with Sanibel elected leaders and management, COTI and the city have taken actions that have prohibited large buses from bringing day trippers to our beaches, created a more rigorous permitting process for our on-island bus tour services, continued the effort to prohibit unsupervised Segway use on Sanibel's shared paths, initiated the creation of architectural standards to ensure attractive resort redevelopment, created a new rigorous permitting process for floating docks to help ensure safety and protection of our ecosystem, created a consensus. It was a 5-0 vote on council to revise the dark skies ordinance with well-defined requirements, a January 1, 2008 implementation date, and the requirement for a proactive citizen education campaign. We have promoted also positive actions on Florida Amendment 1, which won by 75% plus, on 2020 funding, and on various county initiatives. And thank you all who participated in those important events. Additionally, we joyously celebrated Sanibel's and COTI's 40th anniversary. We had 300 folks here in this very hall. We have grown COTI's membership by over 40% in the last year, and we have expanded the number of people we regularly communicate with to 1,000 households and 1,500 people. That's a 5-time increase in the last 5 years. This digital marketing effort, or way of communicating with people, is probably one of the most important overall accomplishments over the last year that has helped us to increase our numbers. But it really is the issues that matter, and it's a team of people that I'll talk about shortly that have made those issues into action. And of course, very importantly, we endorsed Chauncey Goss for City Council, and that was a wonderful process we went through to do that. Those that participated really found it enlightening and enjoyable, and of course he won impressively. So there's some of our accomplishments. It's been a very busy year. Past years have not been as busy, but this has been a very busy year and a productive year. Now to turn to opportunities for continued vigilance and action. And I'll just hit the highlights of this. Some of Sanibel's biggest challenges are off-island, as you all know. The two big pieces is the continued growth of Lee County in southwest Florida, growth of population, tourism, land development, and of course vehicles. We need to all be vigilant about that and work with the city and be a part of a solution to some of those issues, to not eliminate that growth, but to make sure we moderate the impact on our island community. And then very importantly, actions are needed to continue to improve and protect the quality of our watershed. This includes fixes to water pollution and Everglades southern water flow at its source, and it includes construction of reservoirs to allow us to have better water flow. You'll hear the city talking about that a lot. Kevin Moran and Mick Denham have led those efforts, and that's really important. Rayanne Wetzel of SCCF and James Evans, Sanibel's Director of Natural Resources, have studied, written, and spoken extensively about these issues. And if you're not tuned in to what those two folks have written, there's information on the City of Sanibel website, a white paper that's really worth reading. And recently, Rayanne has written some wonderful articles in the most recent SCCF update. And there's alerts that come out from SCCF. That's another email that you should receive regularly, the SCCF email, because there's constant alerts that come out from them. Other on-island issues that COTI's leaders and citizens must monitor and, when possible, influence include the completion of the Sanibel commercial redevelopment actions, the completion of the Sanibel Resort Redistrict architectural standards, the continuing analysis, planning, and decision-making to move the Sanibel Civic and Cultural Core Initiative forward in a fiscally responsible manner, the creation and implementation of an education campaign to inform property owners of the revised dark skies regulations, the enforcement of the 2 new bus ordinances, the initiation, Sanibel's initiative to improve how the city's handling reclaimed water in ways that help protect our waterways. And lastly, and I suggest this is important, welcoming the new generation of residents and snowbirds into our organizations and civic life. The baby boomers are coming, and they will have an impact on the future of Sanibel. This is an ambitious list of items, Our board's going to be meeting in just 6 days, our new board, to talk about our priorities. And we will, that board will be establishing priorities and action items to address some, if not all, of these items. So let me turn now to our leaders. We had a wonderful board this year, but then the COTI board for years has been a powerful organization. COTI leadership is a team effort. It has been the best team that I've ever had the privilege to lead. The following talented and dedicated leaders have made things happen. Thank you to our departing board members, Barbara Joy Cooley, who is 5 consecutive years on the board. I don't know if that's a record, but I'm sure it's happened before. But most importantly, 4 years as president, environmental chair, and 40th anniversary chair. Wayne Pineacre, who's I call the senior senator now from the, call it from the east, is that what it is, Wayne? He's been involved with governance and traffic and nomination chair positions. Marty Packard, who was our previous secretary, Ruth Woodham, who is our current secretary, Phyllis Grissom, and Mike Cascaden. Thank you to all the continuing board members, Carolyn Sweeney, our treasurer, Stu Langdon, Peter Pappas, and David Bath, my right-hand man, vice president, membership chair, and chief operating officer. Thank you to the people who have agreed to be on the board, if elected, today. Joe Salatino, Mike Miller, Maureen Watson, and of course returning members, Larry Shop, who is Land Development Chair, and Mike Gillespie, who is Community Outreach and Nomination Chair. And then one other area of thank you. Thank you to our part-time support people, Kristen Bechtel, who does membership administration and government reporting, Dottie Mount, new property ownership campaign and other administrative support, and Shannon Haynes, a new representative who is our social media communicator. Thank you to all you that have let your voice be heard, and certainly thank you for your membership and your donations. And I guess what I last say is, why don't we have all those people on the board just stand up and give them a round of applause. And do we have any past presidents in the audience? Huh? Here's one. Okay, all the past presidents stand up. Okay, there you go. You know, everybody here is worked to help keep Sanibel special, and we want to keep that going.
My name is Wayne Pineacre, and as has just been announced, I'm a retiring board member. And I have the privilege today of thanking our retiring president, who served as president for the past year and has served on the board for 4 years. Now, I don't have enough time, and you don't have enough interest, I'm sure, for me to go through and comment on each of Jim's accomplishments. You heard what Jim talked about, and I hope you remember some of these. But what I would like to emphasize is what I believe, and I think what the board believes, to be Jim's pinnacle accomplishment for COTI. And that is this: Jim brought COTI into the 21st century with respect to digital communication. And that's in spite of all of the persons like myself who simply didn't understand it at all. He continued the work in this area, which had been initiated by Barbara Cooley, our former president, and he now has us, which to the point where I believe, again, the word pinnacle, in being able to communicate to COTI's members and to the other members of the community what COTI is doing and what our positions are with respect to various issues. as most of you know, and I'm learning it, communication is the 21st century. And communication now is governed by digital communication. Whether it's just happenstance or maybe it's a result, as Jim just reported, COTI now regularly communicates digitally with 1,000 households and 1,500 persons. The board is delighted with that, and we hope you are too. And in the last year, COTI increased its membership by 40%. The board is delighted with that, and we hope you are too. Now, Jim started this a minute ago. He said, how many of you have seen COTI's current website and received digital messages on the website? Come on, show of hands. How many of you? All right. Now, did you like the website? Did you like it? Yes. All right. Thank Jim. Jim also developed a motto for COTI: inform, inspire, and involve. We're trying to follow it. Thank you again, Jim. And now, if I could have my trusty assistant.
Thank you, Wayne, and thank you.
We have something? No. We have a large
Heavy.
and heavy
Oh, my,
token
look at
of
that.
our esteem from the masterpiece of Luke's century. Thank you
Thanks,
very
sir.
much.
I'm David Barth, and it's my privilege to present the 2014 Citizen of the Year Award to an outstanding contributor of our Sanibel community. In previous years, we have chosen citizens who have clearly improved the quality of life on Sanibel. We have recognized individuals who have defended our vision statement and land development code, made significant progress on water quality issues, improved the finances of the city, made other contributions that strongly support COTI's mission of keeping Sanibel special. On occasion in the past, we have been unable to identify a clear winner, and we have simply declined to make any award in those years. Not this year. I would ask you to welcome to the stage in just a moment a citizen who has defended our vision statement and land development code, made significant progress on water quality issues, improved the finances of the city, and made many other decisions that support COTI's mission of keeping Sanibel special. Yes, our winner has made all of these contributions for our Sanibel community. Kevin Ruane, Mayor of Sanibel, please come forward. Kevin, many of us have seen you in Mackenzie Hall doing what I'm doing to many Sanibel citizens. How's it feel on the other end? Anyway, there are a few comments that are well worthy of recording. Mayor Ruane, you have made a significant role in persuading our elected representatives in Tallahassee and Washington to start thinking seriously about funding projects like the C-43 reservoir to keep polluted Lake Okeechobee water out of our estuary and to restore the Everglades to the vibrant ecosystem it once was. And with your leadership, unfunded pension liability and debt service have both been reduced, while local taxes are being held in check. You have supported COTI in our call to limit large bus traffic on Sanibel and led the successful effort to enact an ordinance banning the parking of large buses at City Beach parking lots. You have also supported a COTI initiative regarding architectural standards for resort development to help ensure that such development would be accomplished in a style consistent with Sanibel's small-town character. Thanks to your leadership, the measure passed unanimously and will be the subject of a presentation at April's council meeting. And the final example, though there could be many more, when the United States Congress was on the verge of increasing the cost of flood insurance for communities like Sanibel to the point of being unaffordable, you led a delegation to Washington and fought successfully for maintenance of the existing rate structure. These examples show that you've worked persistently on Sanibel and in Lee County, Tallahassee, and Washington to advance the interests of our island and the surrounding communities. We are thus delighted to present our COTI 2014 Citizen of the Year Award to you, Kevin Ruane, Mayor of Sanibel. Your Luke Century vase has your name, Kevin Ruane, and 2 words, leadership and commitment. Thank you. Congratulations. You want the mic?
Thank you very much. I'm humbled and honored to be here. I'll digress a little bit, like Jim did. We came here some 20 years ago. My mother-in-law and father-in-law have been coming here for 30 years, and they introduced us to Sanibel. My father-in-law is past president of COTI, and I can recall deciding when we sold our second business to come here some 11 years ago. It was 2 weeks before Hurricane Charlie. We certainly saw the devastation. We saw our community come together, and it felt like home, and that's what this place is, home. We had the privilege of understanding COTI. I walked door to door talking about charter amendments. Then next thing I knew, I was helping Mick Denham as his treasurer. Then I was his campaign manager. And then I got a call some 2 years later from Mick and said, I need you to put your name in for city council. Tom Rothman had just resigned, and there's an opening and council gets to put somebody there for 60 days. I remember turning to my wife Doreen and saying, okay, we could do this for 60 days. That was 8 years ago. I'd be remiss if I didn't thank my family, both my son who's here from college spring break and my wife, the sacrifices they've made to allow me to do something that I think helps our community is one that is not only gratifying, and I appreciate all they do, and thank you for your support. Also, my father-in-law and mother-in-law have been very supportive in my initiatives and certainly has been a great statesman to talk to me about various issues, and we can go back from when McDonald's tried to come here. So we have a long history of talking about politics. It's been great, and thank you for all you've done. The last person I need to thank, and there's so many others, is a lady I asked to come here, and y'all know her as the city clerk. Her name's Pamela Smith. Pamela and Doreen kind of run my life, and I always say that. Between running 3 businesses and trying to help you run the city, it's really difficult at times just to try to do that, because whether it's water quality and releases, or flood insurance, or 3 feet of algae on the beach, or a BP spill, or a frozen financial system when I first got in office, you don't anticipate things to come up. But I had this tendency from when I got here, when we all sat in the Holiday Inn, and it was the day after Hurricane Charlie, and I raised my hand and said, how can I help? I know my wife would like me to stop raising my hand. But I truly am honored. It's a privilege, more than you might know, for me to represent you, and you have the confidence for me to do what I do. And I really want to thank this organization. It's been a delight to work with you all. It's certainly been one that I've said my door is open. And I know many people that first knew me probably didn't perceive that way. But now going forward, I know you pick up the phone. I know I do the best I can to answer. We talk about issues, and more times than not, we agree on issues. So I appreciate all you do. Your mission is certainly something very similar I appreciate all your advocacy. My door is always open, and I thank you for this award more than you know. Thank you very much.
Good morning. I have the honor of introducing our keynote speaker to you. I've already written about him in the form of the news release that you may have seen in the island newspapers. But let me tell you a little more. You see, I know this man from his writing. Specifically, I've had the good fortune of reading a number of witty, informative, educational, funny, fact-filled, and thoughtful emails written by this gentleman. The email nickname he's given himself is Happy Old Fogey. And while he is no doubt happy, and he also has a deep and thorough knowledge of the history of Southwest Florida, Old Fogey is not a term I would use to describe this wise and with it man. Wayne Daltrey and I were two of about 50 people who were, for years, part of an email discussion group that consisted of folks on the East Coast and folks on the West Coast who are deeply concerned about the water problems caused by discharges from Lake Okeechobee. He could respond to one of those emails about some terribly complicated subject with one concise, witty, illuminating paragraph like this. Forward pumping was a strategy to assist recovery, since the volume that could be pumped exceeds what minimum flow level releases would be for the Caloosahatchee estuary. That is why the West Coast supported the pump installation. Once installed, of course, it became time to betray us, since all water apparently is for corporate purposes and none is for true economic purposes. Keeping in mind that, of course, the environment is our economy. Time after time, just like that, Wayne would cut to the chase. Wayne is an expert on planning. For 20 years, he was the executive director of the Southwest Florida Regional Planning Council. Then he spent 8 years as the director of the Lee County Smart Growth Initiative. Mr. Daltrey has received his BA degree in political science from the Citadel in South Carolina and his MS degree in planning from Florida State University. He has received numerous awards, including the Urban Land Institute's Pathfinder Award, the Florida Planning Association's Lifetime Service Award, and Leadership Lee County's Founder Award. It's my great honor and pleasure to introduce to you Mr. Wayne Daltrey.
Thank you. I met Barbara Joe back at a meeting on water when she came to tell me that a certain commissioner was telling people how I couldn't be trusted, and she said immediately, "I knew that you were my man." So I'd like to thank you all for turning out for my wife's and I 39th anniversary, which is today. On Friday the 13th today, although when we got married, the Friday the 13th fell on Saturday. And thank you, Shershi LaFemme of Pogo fame. And who recognizes that name, Shershi LaFemme? Very few. Okay, I have to change my talk. Well, this is a room filled with climate refugees. That's what you are. Yeah, now, there's always been climate refugees, so to speak. But, that's our prosperity. And it's nothing new. I mean, when this area was first settled 2,500 years ago, it is believed that they were refugees, not so much climate, but as losers of whatever war went on. But when they got down here, they prospered. And we're talking about the Calusas. And in order to prosper, they had to do something every successive wave of refugees, and I'll use that term too often, had to do. They had to ditch, drain, dike, and fill. Because the Calusas ditched, drained, diked, and filled. and they achieved a population of 40,000 people around Charlotte Harbor and all the way down to Collier County. And what enabled them to do all this ditching, diking, draining, and filling was cheap labor. Now, they didn't, have illegal immigrants. They just went and snatched other people and made them slaves. But it was cheap labor, and life was good. They were a tall, prosperous people. They were expansionists. They were the terror of southern Florida, all the other tribes. For them, life was good. And then came the Spaniards. And although the Calusas probably set a tone that in tongue-in-cheek people said, residents of this area should always had, which is they shot the first tourist full of holes, Ponce de Leon. His fountain of youth became his, demise. He had his revenge, between disease, slave taking, Calusas became cheap labor for someplace else, cultural depression, and forced immigration to Cuba. That population of 40,000 dropped to, well, there was no census. But suffice to say, this area became virtually uninhabited, and we did not achieve 40,000 people in this area again until 1940, 400 years later. So if you think that, we got knocked and there'll never be problems, Calusas on the other side can tell us all about it. So here this vacant land is, you know what happens in a vacuum. This vacuum here started to get filled. There were fishermen coming from Cuba. There were Seminoles refugeeing from losing the first Seminole War. And there was white land speculators. Now I'm going to use that phrase a couple times also because, the first speculation for Sanibel in the New World Order was 1832. First plat was filed using that powerful tool that the Seminoles did not know about, which is recordation of a plat at the clerk of court. Didn't matter if you had a clear title on the land in those days. Once you filed your plat and showed some proof of ownership, which was rudimentary, it was your land. And that led to the Second Seminole Indian War, and then the third. But the platting of land was the first tool, whether it was farm plats, 20, 40, 80, 160, under whatever Land Act, the United States Congress, or a subsequent smaller scale plat into town lots, and Sanibel got them both. It encouraged, by having an easy vehicle to sell land, encouraged people to buy land. And then the climate refugees from the north started to come with a great deal more comfort. And for that reason, we supported and established steamship lines. And for that reason, we did everything we could to get the railroads to come down. And then these Seminole Wars and what we in the South refer to as the late unpleasantness, the growth continued from that point on. So this area by 1910 had achieved a stunning population of 7,000 people. And we realized we had a problem. This land's wet. We filled up the uplands for all practical purposes with 7,000 people, which is no way of saying there wasn't a heck of a lot of uplands, particularly if you're thinking agriculture. So let's establish some more useful tools like drainage districts, which can be established through the county clerk. Let's try it again. The district court system, they could establish a 298 drainage district, and they did, and they prospered. And basically, you just tax the land and dig a ditch, and the ditch would drain the water out. And so, more land magically appeared from the waters, and we platted it, and we prospered. I'll fast forward to about 1947. Now, Lee County's population at that time was 20,000. The watershed had been altered, well, first by the Colusa when they first started digging routes to Lake Okeechobee, and then Hamilton-Disston brought the steam engine and got us a more reliable route to Lake Okeechobee, and they decided to run up to Kissimmee, and then he went bankrupt. And then successive folks said, you know, that's a good idea, but he just didn't build it big enough, so let's widen it. And they did, and you know, the Caloosahatchee River, which was meandering and ended at the small chain of lakes in Henry County, you know, went all the way through. Once you dig a channel, it's like a bathtub plug that you emptied and the water went out. So by 1910, one of our big problems was drought. 7,000 people. We had to start figuring out what to do. So from that point on, we started going into not only drainage districts, but in effect, ways to hold the water back. So you had this back and forth of let's get the land drained and then let's try and store it. Get the land drained, try and store it, because oddly enough, it doesn't rain all that much till recently in the winter and early to late spring, and yet in the summer it gives us 55 inches of rainfall. You know, it's a comparison. 55 inches of rainfall is a pile of water this high on every square foot in Southwest Florida. Now, when I define Southwest Florida, I think back to when I was at the RPC, that's 6,000 square miles. Well, if you get out your little calculator and every cubic foot of water has 7.5 gallons, and then you multiply that by 4.5, and then realize every acre's got 43560, and every square mile's got 640, and then you multiply it by 6,000. You've thrown away your calculator because all you got now is a number of zeros and some E and a number after that. And I never knew what that meant. And good luck if you do. Yeah, there was a lot of water. New York gets 44 inches. Texas gets about 22. California about 17. And New Mexico and Arizona, our competitors, you know, get 11. And we're complaining about drought, because we got so effective at ditching, diking, and draining that, well, the water went away. And, you know, in case you haven't compared, where's, you know, Texas, except for the coast, New Mexico, Arizona, and most of California, and just about all New York are high. They have things called mountains. We're low. And so when you take a couple feet of water off the land, there ain't much left, particularly since it's all lime rock here, and those who know enough science to know that fresh water weighs a little bit less than salt water, and so it sits on top, and like an old kid's toy where you used to pound a stick down a hole and another stick down a hole until they pop out the other side. If there's no sticks in the hole, the water comes, in our case, back up, and so saltwater intrusion started marching inland as fast as it could possibly go. So, hey, 1910, we've successfully drained the area, and we got droughts, and we got water problems. So water management became the basic growth management tool. Some areas just couldn't get wet. In other places, it got so dry that if you built a wooden house, you got to sit by one fine day and watch all your possessions go up in flame, because, you know, we still lit things when the wind blows, and the wind blows here, carried things out. So the second growth management tool was fire protection. If you had it, you could probably survive. You didn't, well, you weren't going to get insurance. Kind of like mobile homeowner today. But anyway, this was our system. And you think about it, all right, that's over an area with 55 inches of rainfall a year. So I'll fast forward to 1947, because in addition to that drought and a lot of rain, then there's that hurricane that comes every now and then. That's kind of like being a war veteran. You only went to battle every now and then, but after the first one, you didn't look forward to the second. So anyway, the hurricanes would come, they'd dump a lot of water. We dumped a lot of water, so much that the Caloosahatchee River Valley was flooded 22 feet above sea level was the water level in an area where the land level was 15, and I'm talking about LaBelle. LaBelle was 7 feet underwater. That whole valley was full. Then you take the east coast, the north side, and you had a lot of flooding, so we needed a special management effort. That thus begatteth the Central and Southern Flood Control District and Flood Control Project. The names are almost interchangeable. Florida helped create a local sponsor for a federal effort to protect people because the floods around Lake Okeechobee killed thousands in the late 1920s. Successive storms, continuing the flooding is destroying property. We got to do something. So we set up a master plan, heavily engineered, and started moving water like it was the Chicago rail yards. You could switch water back and forth based on which switches you flip. An area that went from 40 inches of rainfall a year to 100. Didn't work very well, so you just expanded the system. Expand the system, and expand the system. But every time you expanded, you were issuing a promise of flood protection, thus development headed that way. So what did that mean to us? So in 1947, Lee County's population is about 20,000. The whole southwest Florida I just referred to is maybe 40,000. Back to the level of the Calusa Indians. After we started making sure land was a little bit drier and issuing that promise, there came something known as the pre-delivery platted land subdivision. Pre-sale delivery platted land subdivision. We got to be ground zero for that activity between Cape Coral, Lehigh Acres, Port Charlotte, Cape Cave, Kavanaugh Corporation, Golden Gates Estates, Marco, Port LaBelle. We end up with 1.1 million lots sold roughly in the period from 1955 to 1970. So Lee County population 22,000 in 1950, 65,000, 68,000 in 1960. That's a lot of growth. Now, if you're from New York, the numbers don't seem like much, but if you're here, the velocity of incomers and newcomers was basically whoever was there in 1950 was outnumbered virtually 3 to 1 by 1960. And of course, we have a high velocity of population here, so every 7 years, half the population that was there disappears. They either move out, they've had enough, or they die. So you end up with an even bigger velocity. So by 1960, in effect, there was about 10,000 people left who had been around long enough to call the place home, and everybody else was someplace else. And it started to show a lot of stresses, particularly in the political stream. And in 1960, Lee County didn't have the authority to plan a zone because in Florida, 1960, it took a special act of Florida legislature to grant that communist power of land regulation, because after all, Marx had it in his statement. The fact that George Washington also hired the first planter in the United States is irrelevant if you got yourself a good mean, and if planting is communism, then George Washington was our first communist. But okay, we in Lee County eventually got the authority and started planning and zoning everywhere. Because Fort Myers was the only city in the county, so the county was doing all the planning and zoning. And since the platted lands had basically weren't planned, they were basically filing a plat at the county clerk for $22, say, square mile. It was pretty good business. And in Cape Coral, one of the laughing things in Cape Coral, and they laugh about it, is that clearly they only had 1 square mile plat ever written. And then when they bought some more land, they would take that same plat and put it down. It didn't matter if, the land wasn't the same. And for variety, they, instead of just picking up and moving it, they would just hold on one edge and flip it. And so they got a road that runs like this in Cape Coral based on every time they flip the map. Okay, so, and Lehigh Acres makes Cape Coral look well planned. Lehigh Acres plat was 640 acres. Now, back when the surveys were done, Some cases, the engineers, the Army engineers, were a little rushed. Remember I mentioned that Second and Third Seminole War? The Third was here. If you're out there with your surveyor's thing and some guy starts shooting at you, you decide, we're going to rush this job. So Lehigh Acres, a square mile of land doesn't necessarily have 640 acres. 637, 658 is close enough for government work, particularly when you're not being paid by the job, you're in danger of your life. So in Lehigh Acres, their idea was to take the plat, and it would be 600 acres of lots, and the 40 acres would be like a square hole. It's kind of like the first wheel, square, and there's something wrong with the design, you know. But they had that 40 acres, and that was for community services. And commission at that time was strong on community services, so by preserving that 40 acres, you had school there, you can do everything you want there, shopping, they all fit in that 40 acres. No one ever told them, asked the county or city planner, they didn't have any, was that enough? But that's what they did. And then when the commission changed, they went back and platted the 40 acres. So Lehigh Acres had mile after mile after mile and no services. So that's what was going on in 1960. Lee County starts some planning and zoning, and they hire a planner, and the planner comes in, here's the plan, and as the record states, his name no longer appeared in the minutes of the Planning Commission because he had a land use map. Fired. Next one, fired. Third one, fired. Now I first came to Sanibel as a child. My parents brought us across, me and my sister, crossing the ferry. We're frothing on the beach. And then we almost lost my sister because she wandered into a pit of quicksand. I considered that kind of like a little analogy of what being a public planner's like, because when you find yourself in quicksand, if you stop moving, you sink and disappear without a trace. So the only way you can survive is to swim. You swim in the quicksand, and that way you stay afloat, and you also try to stay on message. But you may not be at the same spot this week you were last week, but you're still in message, and your message is, I'm trying to stay afloat. But yeah, that's what planning was like here then, to try and keep the message going and not be executed. So when I moved here in 1975 as a planner, after I had the best reason of all leaving Manatee County, where I was planning director, my first job out of school, but I was a Vietnam veteran, that got me the 5 points, was that I had managed to impress the county commission so much they told my boss he would never get a raise. But we don't dare fire him because his mother's the head of the DAR and his father's the head of the Retired Officers Association, and he too had a future land use map. So I came down here because I couldn't afford to get married on what they paid up there. So that's the best reason to come down in 39 years, right? So I'm here in 1975, and let you know that, things just don't change. I moved here in 1975. There was a Goss on the city council. 2015, there's a Goss in city council. Things don't change. No, so we started to work on trying to get some of the issues that really exist addressed. And my background's in economics. It's easy for me to be an environmentalist because it's not good for the economy. After all, you wipe out your environment, you end up like Iraq. The cradle of civilization. It's had fields of unending bounty. And they ditched dike drains so much and used cheap labor. Well, that's why we've been in war there for a while, because they ended up with a lot of resources that were rare, scarce, and below their feet, and everything else they had to import their food. You can overdo it. So here we are in 1975, and I'm saying, well, okay, good economy means a good environment and also good planning. We can accommodate all these climate refugees, because by 1970, Lee County's population gone from 68,000 to 105,000. 105,000 was important, or 100,000 was the important, because you become a standard metropolitan statistical area. And if you're a business geek, you're looking for good markets, becoming an SMSA meant you were no longer a little rural town. You had become a large populated area, and for that reason, you could start investing and expanding or moving businesses down there or creating a branch. And for that reason, this area's economy kind of like entered a new dimension. In 1975, when I got here, that new dimension had translated itself in understanding we need some things. Well, we wanted a real airport. A real airport. You know, we had Page Field, but people didn't really call that a real airport. I mean, the terminal building was a little concrete shed, and if you flew in on a DC-3, and those of you who remember World War II shuffled up and jumped out the door of. The workhorse of the military in World War II, but the last one built was like 1947, and here it was 1975, and so the last one built was older than half the passengers getting off the plane, and of course it was raining, which is not an uncommon experience down here. The agent said, "Here's an umbrella." He met you at where the steps came down, said, "Step lively, it's lightning," and there's the terminal building. And if you're trying to become the getaway place for the rich and famous and the suave and the debonair, that wasn't going to do it. And we'd also heard about this interstate highway system. Now, I came down here from Braden. That's where I grew up, so I consider myself Florida. And we heard about that interstate system, too. So, but down here we were told, that interstate system, you ain't going to get till 2008. Has anybody here ever seen the movie Honky Tonk Freeway? Yeah, okay. Honky Tonk Freeway is a story about a mythical town in Florida, which was based on, well, so roadside tourism. In other words, it was kitsch. And they heard the interstate was coming by, but they weren't going to get an interstate interchange, so they said, so the mayor went up there. The mayor went up there to Tallahassee and spoke to DOT. Ever spoke to DOT? And said, we'd like an interstate interchange. Well, we'll take. And says, well, about $10,000 a Kentucky Fried Chicken box. Now, the movie then has this great scene of this little village that was, there, having a festival to raise the money for the bribe. And that's exactly, $10,000 for DOT. They had a little, thermometer, and they're raising, they got $10,000. Mayor goes back to Tallahassee and says, "How are we doing?" He says, "Oh, we're doing fine. Here's some Kentucky Fried Chicken." The guy looks in there and says, "Aha, you're set." And the next shot is the interstate going by the town, no interchange. Not that the public official would ever mislead you or even lie, but that's what happened. Now, the rest of the movie is how they get their interchange. But for us, when I saw that movie, I said, we almost did that. Heck, we could have done that. I don't know. I don't recall the festival. But we were told that wasn't going to happen. We weren't going to get it. So all the Rotary clubs in the area got together and created a political movement. And by 1980, we had our interstate. Now, mind you, it got here so fast, the interchanges were on dirt roads. For those who've been here long enough, Daniels was a dirt road. Daniels, the big road that is to the interstate for much of Lee County, was a dirt road there. They built so fast. So here we are. We're growing like topsy. So 1971 interstate, 1980 we had the interstate. We also, by 82, opened the new airport out where it is, and one of two airport relocations is the Environmental Protection Act of 1969, because we were able to go through all the bells and whistles to get that moved. In order to get what? More people to move down here faster. Now you can drive faster and you can fly in to a wonderful, beautiful airport, and thus we got more climate refugees because they're always fleeing the cold. Except not everybody. The rest, they half come down here because they're climate refugees. The other half are looking for work. For every 2 people move down, you create a job. In the aggregate, you take that fragment of a grocery store clerk and the one who works in the restaurant and that bureaucrat in the courthouse. But it never grows in the city hall. No. But always there's job being created by growth. And so we're not birthing that many babies here. In fact, if we didn't have working age people move down, we'd have a negative growth rate because, you know, the biggest export out of the airport's coffins. So for a while there it was. That's not. So the people move down here looking for work, and they bring their kids, and all of a sudden you gotta expand the school. All right, so you end up have to have everything. So year 1980, we got interstate coming. We're getting ready to move the airport, and we've got 205,000 people. We went from 105,000 to 205,000 people. We had 100,000 people in 10 years, which was all the growth since 1832 with the first plat to 1970. Wow, that's a lot of growth. Well, okay, so we're getting our transportation fixed, and some say, well, you know, we need education. We need an educated workforce. Oh, really? Yeah, you know, something, you know, for every 2 people move down creates a job, and every 2 jobs created, they're kind of like low-paying jobs, creates a mildly supervisor job. It's not all that highly paid, and every 2 of those you create a job that actually pays well, like lawyer, engineer, bureaucrat. So you get, and no, I won't insult teachers by throwing that list because they've never been well paid. We have a lot of growth that needs a lot of workers and needs a lot of education. Now, in 1962, 64, Essen Junior College was created on a lonely country road that had just been connected to Cape Coral over a 2-lane bridge that you could roller skate on around 9:30 in the morning because that wasn't much traffic. And there wasn't that much traffic 8 o'clock because there was, other than going to the school that was just built there on that building that isn't much bigger than this building, was the start of Lee County's post-secondary education system. And now, at what used to be Edison, sorry, I'm getting old, I can't remember the new name. What used to be Edison has like 12,000 students. And the university we were told we would never have by 1990 because we were the furthest of any major populated area away from a high-quality educational facility. Now, the guy who said that was the Secretary of Education for the state of Florida, and he said that at Edison State College. And boy, you could just, you know, you didn't, you know, it could have been the coldest day of the year, and you would still have been toasty warm from the heat being generated by the Edison people. But that struck a chord, so once again, you know, being told we can't have anything, we united and got together and went to Tallahassee, and there wasn't a Kentucky Fried Chicken box. We got a bill that said if you guys can pull it off, you can find a site, we might build you a university, but it's got to be a free site. We got a lot of free sites offered. The one that was picked, I can tell you, wasn't bad if you looked at it from the sky. And maybe a little inconvenient for those of us to the north of Lee County and Charlotte, but got a lot more convenient to people in Collier County, and, well, you know, money talks. So we got the university, and then that begat private schools, so now we got like 14 post-secondary schools here. So 1990 was the introduction of all that, and our population was 339,000 people. A big chunk are still going to Cape Coral and Lehigh Acres, but we had developed some quality in our planning of our communities, and so Lee County was one of the leading counties in the state for developments of regional impact, which inspired a lot more growth. So by the year 2000, we were 440,000 people, and we thought we'd seen a lot of growth. And you know, without really approving any more developments, by year 2010, we were 618,000 people, and that was 4 years into a recession. Because climate refugeeism had gotten to really take off. Of course, baby boomers were hitting the purchasing of that second home, and of course, anyone who was younger than baby boomers looking for work. And whatever people want to say about how bad our unemployment here got, it wasn't as bad as other places. And frankly, a lot of our unemployment was cheap mobile labor, which, because they weren't slaves and serfs, took off. So there were 618,000 people. You know, as I said, didn't really have to approve another development. And the reason why I'll come back to that theme is, you know, forecast, well, today we're supposedly at 670,000 people thereabouts, but, you know, we're forecasted to well over 1 million people without one more lot needing to be platted there. No chance that won't happen, but that's the way it is. So we're vested for over 1 million people in Lee County. Now, back in 1950, Lee County was 800 square miles, and that's 22,000 people. And you go to the city boundary and shoot out, and you don't have to worry about your bullet hitting anybody. In fact, a lot of the area was considered a wildlife management area, which was a tax dodge for large landowners. And it was, but it was in a conservation status, which disappeared when you could plat your land, and it disappeared. 1960, when the population 68,000, we were still 800 square miles. And year 2000, it's 440,000 people. We're still 800 square miles. At 1 million people plus, Lee County will be how big? Nah, about 795. Sea level rise is real. But you're getting the drift. It's getting a lot more crowded. And the more crowded you get a community, the more sophisticated you need for your management structure, whether it's public or private. Let's get down to it. You know, government keeps people from killing each other by uniting them in their hatred of government. So, you know, with the population we have today and the population of the future, we have some challenges facing this area and your watershed. And the first challenge is just how big is the watershed that Sanibel sits the mouth of? You know, because the talk was the watershed. Well, I didn't focus on the watershed. The original watershed was about 1,100 square miles because it ended in central Hendry County. It was most of Lee County, of course, that bits of Hendry and those fragments of glades. 1,100 might even be a little bit large, but it's a little hard to tell because, hey, by 1880, Hamilton Diston started his steam dredge, went up to Caloosahatchee. We stood on the shores of Fort Myers going, yay, we're going to get all this economic prosperity. And when he dug past the lakes, he expanded the watershed. Now, the whole estuary evolved over the 1,100 square mile watershed. So every extra gallon that came down that new dug canal became another gallon that may not be able to be assimilated. Well, you're allowed a little range. After all, a rainfall system extends roughly from a low of 40 inches to a high of 100 inches, provides for some resilience in that system, which we then proceed to test with that drought cycle I was referencing. 1910. Well, okay, so back and forth, back and forth. 1947, the watershed we had became something that changed weekly because depending upon where the canal is supposed to direct the water to the west or to the south, or from the south to the lake and then to the west, the watershed is where the water comes from. So when you start being able to throw a switch, like at a rail yard, and train goes this way instead of that way, while the water's going this way instead of that way, you end up with a larger watershed. But even then, that wasn't too bad because the lake was kind of kept in measure. Because after all, people, that was a crystal clear lake. I mean, after all, you could see the sandy bottom. Around 1970, 1980, the sandy bottom. Our river had a sandy bottom, and it started to go. It went away in that it got covered with silt, and the silt, of course, is frankly what used to be the Everglades. Because the back pumping into Lake Okeechobee and the fore pumping that came down, Yeah, they pumped down the Kissimmee too, because you couldn't drain it fast enough just by that river. Yeah, even if it got done widen it when it rained really hard, like 1960, when the Corps of Engineers said, in effect, everything south of what is now I-4 was flooded. Everything south of I-4, what is now I-4, was underwater due to Hurricane Donna. Now, wasn't all storm surge, because storm surge basically stopped at US 41. Well, no, it didn't. It went a lot further in Collier County, but every place else, roughly US 41, and not even there. But rainfall, all the rainfall came, the area couldn't drain fast enough. With all the ditches, dikes we'd already created, they still cannot drain the area fast enough. So we learned from that by making sure people didn't build in low-lying areas and creating preserves. No, we didn't. I was kidding. We dug more ditches. It took a lawsuit to stop the eastern Henry County from looking like western Palm Beach County in the late 1970s, started by, funny enough, Broward County, but we joined in, Lee County, to keep them from dredging even more canals in order to ship more water into Lake Okeechobee, which would then get discharged in exciting ways. Well, even then, though, we still had a decent shot at trying to control some of the water flow. And around 1990, we'd gone from 339,000 people in 1990 to 440,000 in year 2000. And showing our political will, we said nothing when the Water Management District shifted its management regime from, of course they were court ordered, from discharging to Florida Bay and killing it to running water back into Lake Okeechobee. And then running it our way into the East Coast. And the East Coast is a little more politically motivated, so even though it was designed to take more water going east, that water came west. So why am I focusing on that? Because it's the one thing I think we can control. Because the other things that are facing us as we go to 1 million people, besides the climate change, scientists are saying, well, that Greenland ice cap and the western Antarctica, they've kind of reached a tipping point. There's no going back. Now, scientists have been known to make mistakes. One can hope this is one of them, because one of the things that anyone here can do is take the volume of ice that's in those ice caps and calculate it and then put over the planet of Earth that we live on, as opposed to Jupiter, where it wouldn't make much difference. It'll raise the water table here, 200 feet. I mean, staying on the roof here won't do that much good. Now, if you're saying 800 years from now, Iran will have nukes by then. We won't have to worry. No, but if you start arguing about the escalation effect, when you start to slide, it's hard to stop. So, the climate change is something that we need to be politically active on in regard to emissions. And even then, we can expect a few feet of rise. Now, a few feet of rise currently calculated over a century. And so that's a concern for the great-grandchildren I don't have yet, from the grandchildren I don't have yet. But, still, we don't plan to be the last generation. And we shouldn't. So we need to actually take climate change into our analysis, particularly storms and droughts that tie to that. And that's why in Sanibel the phrase storm is something that gets your attention, like hurricanes. Because if there's a frequency, duration, or intensity aspect to hurricanes we haven't experienced yet, we don't want to. And so it's nothing we can fix here, but at least we can raise our voices. Well, what we can fix here is evacuation, right? I did the first analyses back in 1975 on what it would take to evacuate this island and all the others and where they would go. In those days, the plan was you would get in your car, drive till you couldn't, and got out. And the state plan was to blockade US 41, which was the only road we had, effectively, at the county line. zones. So in case you haven't noticed, there's not a lot of other routes out of here if that was then added to the interstate system. So we worked hard, went to Tallahassee, got all that changed, at least they didn't block it. But we also helped create a capital improvement program that widened the roads, increased the ability of people Sanibel and Fort Myers Beach and Boca Grande, because I was multi-county, to get to a place that was high enough that we actually tried to figure out how to have shelters there that was dry enough that you could actually have a destination. Most of you ignore it because you're going to reserve a hotel to yourself or have friends or something, but at least we went through the effort and did create the capacity that's available for use. Which is why if we plan to fail on other things, this is bad for us. I will say I am a strong impact fee proponent. I will say that because if you think boards and councils and commissions cheerfully raise your millage rate, they don't. If you think sales taxes are easy to put in place, they aren't. If you think that impact fees are unjust and you'd rather suffer the impacts of not inflicting the injustice of impact fees, road congestion increases on evacuation routes, times to evacuate climb, and it's always a chancy thing anyway, you can be screwed if you do not maintain and keep on target outcomes of your transportation improvement system. And if you're adding people and adding vehicles and not expanding your network accordingly, you are creating congestion, and a bad day to find that out is when you just got your notice to evacuate your island. Planning to fail, we can do that. We can plan it for roads, we can plan it for schools. The key is to have outcomes stated, measurable, and can be fixed through investment. That's what your comprehensive plan does, should do, and should continue to do, and any effort that is being made to not do that should be strongly resisted. I will not go into any great details, but I've noticed that there are capital investments in the plan for at least the county that are to put expenditures and improvements in places where people aren't, in an era where you've cut the impact fees that would have paid for it, and instead are going to use gas taxes, which are what was maintaining the routes that people were using to get off islands or to get on them. Spring break, after all. But if you don't make and continue those investments in the places where people are, the problems you are creating become incalculable. We never thought we would lose a major American city, but you can trace it back to not investing in capital infrastructure in the New Orleans area at the rate necessary. Least favored region syndrome. This is why political activism in Tallahassee and Washington, D.C. is critical, because to quote Camelot, it's not the earth the meek inherit, it's the dirt. A blanket, what was the statement I heard? You do not make a blanket longer by cutting off the bottom and showing it to the top. There is never enough money to take care of infrastructure needs or service investments. But you don't have to make the pot smaller, and that's effectively what we're doing. If you are then silent in a system of drying up resources, you have just voted yourself to the bottom of the budget. You must stay active. Your city council and your county commission, strongest role, in my opinion, is the bully pulpit. They can tax, they can regulate, they can be service providers, but saying what needs to be done and standing for that is the strongest role they can have. It disciplines the private sector, believe it or not. I had the vice president of U.S. Chamber of Commerce said, We need government regulations because that's where we find business ethics. If we don't have the regulations, the business ethic is the fastest, gets the mostest. Well, yeah. But without the regulations and without the bully pulpit, you don't have anybody stating the way things should be. And that is the strongest role I think a city council and county commission can have for a locality, particularly when you want the state or federal government to pay attention. So you cannot ever be silent on decisions that affect you. You're adversely affected by government debt. Well, wait a minute, your city council doesn't have government debt, or it's manageable. County commission doesn't really have debt, it's all manageable. State of Florida's, it's illegal to have an unbalanced budget, so, they balance, they don't have debt. Well, folks, the United States, if you sold it in an open market for fair market value, it's about $70 trillion. National debt is $17.1. So, personal debt is another 20 billion. Corporate debt's another 25 billion. Balance of payments debt is, growing every day. Whenever you have debt service, and debt service is the money that you'd rather spend at a restaurant instead you use and pay off your credit cards. You take all that debt service and you're suppressing the ability of a community, a county, a state, and a nation to invest in the future. We got the information age through research and development. Money for research and development for these last 2 decades have been dropping off markedly everywhere. And so if we're going to wait for that next stage, that kid who can graduate from MIT, who can make fusion work and solve all our energy problems, we're not investing in getting that kid an education, we're not going to have that. So we have to control debt. And if you think growth, which is what the president says, growth is making sure our debt payments are less than they used to be. Well, no, they're less per capita. But if you're not balancing your budget, the debt increases. And so you'll end up being, Greece is just like the canary in the bottom of the mine shaft. All countries that do not manage their debt end up suppressing the quality of life for the citizens of those countries. And then energy. Okay, for fracking, bless the frackers. They've taken us away from oil shortages. Well, they have. They've given us another 2 decades of oil reliability, so to speak. You don't want to live there, but it's doing it. Are we using that time wisely so that we get to a more sustainable energy situation? I'm going to leave that to you to answer. But suffice to say, without one more lot being platted, Lee County's population, due to climate refugees, will grow past 1 million people in your watershed. And the only way it stops is if we make this place too miserable to live in. My political comment about impact fees, Collier County kept theirs. And so all their housing is more expensive than ours. Where are the workers going to live? And did we really sign on to be the bedroom community for the workers of Collier County? We have become their excuse. I think we need to have our impact fees back where they need to be, or else get another tax. Good luck on that one. But we have to invest in our future, because any dollar we don't spend that we could on infrastructure becomes a form of debt measured in congestion, whether it's school or road or emergency response times, that'll cost way more to correct than it did to not have happen in the first place. Any questions?